Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, executive coach for high-performing women. Join me for inspiring conversations with over 500 women leaders around the world as they share how they excelled in their careers or launched successful businesses and the important role that support played along the way. Because as we always say, having it all does not mean doing it all alone. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so happy to have you here. You know, it just would not be the same without you. And today I'm excited to welcome our guest, JerriAnne Boggis. JerriAnne is the executive director of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire. The Black Heritage Trail promotes awareness and appreciation of African American history and life in order to build more inclusive communities today. They believe that if we could embrace our shared history, we could heal racial anxiety and misunderstanding in our communities, in the state, and in the country. Now, this episode, I think, is such a good timing because not only did I enjoy the conversation with JerriAnne, but the timing of it, discussing history, shared history among people overall, the importance of all of our history being honored, the state that the United States is in at this time, or the time of this recording, I will say, discussing all of that at this time just seems so powerful, so important. It just, the universe does this. It happens in alignment as it's supposed to. So I hope you will listen to this conversation with an open mind. We all have different opinions. We have some shared opinions, but here, or if you don't know, I'll let you know. Here, we're all about expressing ourselves, sharing our thoughts, sharing our opinions. I, of course, share mine as the host. JerriAnne shares hers as the guest. But it's a space that I really want to create where everyone is open to be able to celebrate themselves and really be able to bring forth the things that are important to them. And right now, what is really important and on my heart right now is people feeling seen, not feeling erased, whether that be your background, where you're from, your sexuality, your personality, anything like that. Everyone deserves to be loved and respected and, again, to be seen. So I'm going to send a message out to all of you right now and say, I hope you feel seen and loved and that you are well today as you go into this episode and my conversation with JerriAnne Boggis. Here we go. All right. So JerriAnne, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. I look forward to an amazing conversation.
Absolutely. So my first question for you is, tell us all about the Black Heritage Trail.
So the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire is in its 8th year. But it grew out of an organization called the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail that was started by an African-American woman, Valerie Cunningham, who was born and raised in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And she started her research from she was about 16, really looking to find herself in her town, in her state, looking for what Black history was there. And, it took her quite a while and a lot of research to put together in what turned into a 23-spot trail in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And when I came on about 8 years ago working with her, she had amassed so much information on New Hampshire's 450 years of Black history that we decided to create a statewide organization and move beyond the seaport coast of Portsmouth to encompass the Black history stories across the state. So the organization raises awareness for New Hampshire's Black history. We celebrate Black culture in order to build inclusive communities in New Hampshire today, grounded in history, but looking at social issues around African-American history and culture in our state.
Why would you say it's important to preserve this history and of keeping in mind, or interestingly enough, just the times that we're in when a lot of things in history seem to be threatened with erasure? Why is it important to keep something like this in New Hampshire alive and well, and just a record of it important in preserving that?
So, New Hampshire has always been thought of as one of the whitest state in the Union. And that's kind of how it gets put on and then people say New Hampshire way up north and there's no Black people living there. I've heard that when I came to New Hampshire myself, no Black people living there. But once, through this work of Outer Cunningham, through the works of the trail, you realize that we have 450 years of Black history, enslaved and free Blacks in our state and across the state, not just in one spot and not just the story of enslavement. And when we look at these stories, these are not just African-American stories. These are American stories. They're included. They're part of the things that make up our American history. When we look at how these stories break stereotypes. In 1779, a group of 20 enslaved Africans in Portsmouth wrote a document, the 1779 Petition for Their Freedom, which when you look at it and you examine it real careful, the language they used, the thought, the critique, the irony, everything rivals the American Declaration of Independence. And seeing that document in place at a time when people thought that Black people were unintelligent, that they couldn't make arguments in English, that they couldn't articulate for their own freedom, that has to change your mind of who you think Black people, African Americans were, who you think the enslaved were. And I think those stories, we have Harriet Wilson, the first Black woman to publish a novel in English from New Hampshire, born and raised in New Hampshire. We have the first African American person to be elected to public office in New Hampshire. So these stories of triumph, even in a state of a troubled state, a contested state, you have to look at the bigger picture, and you have to ask yourself how those stereotypes still exist today. And once you know these stories, it has to break those stereotypes. Once you can't unknow a story once you know it. You can't unknow the story once you see and you are faced with the facts of the story. Then it really is on you. The onus is on you. But you will not unknow those stories. And knowing enough of them, knowing a broader sense of place of African Americans in a place that's typically thought of as just a white space, you have to really imagine what you think Blackness is, what Black culture is, what African Americans are. They can't remain these stereotypes, especially in this contested time when we're trying to get rid of that history, right?
Yes, and I love what you said about you can't unknow it. That's so important. That's why it's important, or for me, it just reaffirms the importance of sharing our stories for all of us as human beings, and all different parts of American culture and cultures all over. Once people hear it, they can try to deny it, but denying it is very different than unknowing it, right? Or being
exactly aware. You may not believe it. You may
not believe it.
Do whatever you want with it.
That's right.
But you can't unknow it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Now, how did your history, or your journey, I should say, bring you to New Hampshire? You mentioned when you first came there. So where are you from originally? And did you always have an interest in history?
So I'm originally from Jamaica, and I came to New Hampshire. Well, I came to the U.S. via Alabama to go to college, and then ended up in New Hampshire for my last 2 years in college. Then, as life would have it, you get married and have kids, and I'm living in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. I too would be just like anybody when you think about New Hampshire. It's a place devoid of Black history because there are no signs anywhere. There's nothing to tell you that these, in the time when I was here, that Black people lived and were a vital part of the fabric of the state. There was none of that stories, that awareness. Mostly it was, New Hampshire was a throughway state to Canada as part of the Underground Railroad, right? We were never born and raised in New Hampshire. And I think for me, so in the town that I lived in, I became aware of the Harriet Wilson story, the first Black woman to publish a novel in English, in her book, Our Negro Sketches in the Life of a Free Black. And when I discovered that, it totally changed my perception of the town. It just totally changed how I engaged in our state. And because there was, in a sense, roots, right? A visible representation of myself, through Harriet's book, through her story, through her writing, her accomplishments that she was able to achieve, even at, the odds were against her of achieving. So as a woman of color, it gave me that sense of place in a state that denied my, that I had a place there, gave me that sense of roots, that groundedness, that a woman like myself walked on the streets that I now walk on, that connection. Although I'm not African American, it connected me to Wilson's story as a woman of color in a predominantly white environment. So that's how I came to this work. There was an article in the paper that said that I came. It's a little bit of a long story on how I started, but I formed there. There was a thing about the book was not studied in school, yet it's studied all over the world for its exploration of indentured servitude, because it's the first novel written by a Black woman. For its the whole thing. It's connection to slavery in a state that, we tell the myth that slavery never happened in the North. Her full title said, showing that slavery shadows fall even here in the North. So coming to that, they didn't want it in the schools, and I formed the organization, the Harriet Wilson Project, with the simple goal of having her book studied in the town that she was born and raised in. And it turned into creating the first monument, the statue, a memorial statue for Harriet Wilson in her hometown. And it became the first statue in our state honoring a person of color. And then I met Valerie Cunningham, who was doing the work on the seacoast, and she pulled me in, and here we are today, putting markers up all across the state, making sure that this history is visible to anybody everywhere.
And with Harriet, it's Harriet Wilson?
Yes, Harriet E. Wilson.
Harriet P. Wilson. And the name of the book again is?
It's Our Nig, or Sketches in the Life of a Free Black.
Sketches in a Life. I'm writing this down. Everyone write this down. I had not heard of or read this, and I'm going to get it. So was she born free, or was she born enslaved?
She was born free. But
free versus, obviously we're all born free.
Right.
But you know what I mean.
She was not enslaved. Her father was Black. Her mother was white. Mm-hmm. Her father was, from what we understand, he was formerly enslaved, but then free. So he was born to a free man of color. Mm-hmm. But he died. Her mother abandoned her to this family where she became an indentured servant. Mm-hmm. And so her story is written about her life with this family as an indentured servant, and she compares her time in that family as being, a shadow, showing that slavery shadows falls even here. So she compares her life to that of an enslaved person.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
She was abandoned at 7 years old to this family and stayed with them till she reached her majority at 18 and left.
And that was in New Hampshire.
That was in New Hampshire, yes.
Interesting. And that
book was about her time with that family.
And you came to that work, or her work, before you came to the Black Heritage Trail.
Yes. I see. Yeah. Within a couple of years from that, I met up with Valerie Cunningham and came to the work that she was doing in Portsmouth after we had unveiled our monument in Milford. I started working with Valerie with this bigger picture of looking at the state.
And that was about 8 years ago?
No, it was longer working with Valerie because I worked with her with the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. But then 8 years ago, we moved from just the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail and just telling Milford's story to telling the full state story.
So with the times, as we started to mention earlier or referenced earlier, the times that we're in, especially in the United States in particular, would you say that the organization has had to undergo any kind of changes, or have you faced any challenges, I guess is more so the word, in keeping these stories alive and the kind of work that you do? Anything like that happen?
So we, in the 8 years we've been the Black Heritage Trail, we've really grown exponentially. So we've done really well. After the George Floyd murder, when, the majority in the country became aware of the disparities between Black and white, we got an outpouring of support. It was like everybody wanted to know, how did we get here, right? And so our role became really important in our state in telling these stories. How did we get to where we are? And now now we're looking at that time that I'll be a critique on this, that maybe that was just window dressing and a quick reaction and not something that was sustainable in the majority culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because here we are in 2025, and we want to roll back all at the national level, roll back all that advances and the inclusion and the inquiry and the interest.
Just 5 years later. It's not like it's even 20 years or generation or anything like that. 5 years, it's like, that's enough.
5 years later, it was like this, maybe it was just a fad and not a deep belief. And that's one of the things that we're looking at with the work that we do. Beliefs are hard to change. And I think at the root of some of these is for the 250 years of believing that Black people were less than, no matter what the evidence says, right? But there's a deep, deep belief that Black folks are less than, and so it takes longer to change beliefs. On the surface, you can be social justice minded, you can be inclusive minded, but deep in your heart, in your own self, in your own room, in your dark space, you don't believe that we're equal. And I think that's at the heart of this quick change. We looked at the surface, but not at the depth. And that's disturbing. That was hard as a woman of color to kind of put my head around, to understand how we can so quickly have lost that goodwill. I'm using the word goodwill, and this may not be the right word, but that understanding or that desire to understand. I think that's a better word. How quickly we lost that desire to understand and reverted to, old ways of being and believing where white supremacy rules,
In the work that you do, how do you, and maybe others around you, but you as you mentioned yourself as a woman of color and working in this space, how do you stay motivated and resilient and committed moving forward and continuing this kind of work when, as we just talked about, in just the last 5 years, it's not even people seemingly wanting to revert it to, let's go back to how it was in 2020. It's like, let's go back to how it was in the 1930s, So, but again, for someone like you or others I think about who are in resistance spaces or activism or any kind of, or just existing as a person who is being targeted, if you will, but still just when you're doing it, when it's around your work, how do you stay motivated? What are the things?
Like anything else, you get down, but then you got to pick yourself up and get back. Because if we don't do it, who will do it? Mm-hmm. If we're not advocating for ourselves, who's going to advocate on our behalf? If we're not speaking up about our role and our place, it's not that we don't belong. We have a place, we have belonged, and we have place. We have played a strong role in the creation and the fabric of the state. As human beings, we have earned, and we more than deserve a seat at the table. Whether we create our own table going forward is a different story, but creating these inclusive stories, looking at a wider picture, a broader picture of American culture. There's nothing that African American culture has not touched, right? Mm-hmm. So we know Some of the stories we look at, like we're bringing together in our Juneteenth program this year, descendants, it's called, bloodlines, descendants of former presidents and descendants of the people that the founding fathers, and I put that in quotes, had enslaved. And we're looking at 250 years when their ancestors were enslaved by these men that we revere so much. Their stories tells us these descendants have carried these stories through generations for 250 years. And we're now bringing that to the attention of the rest of America, that our founding fathers were not necessarily men of virtue. They were flawed human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at that. It's an including story. And we can't package our story to suit one narrative when a whole truth is sitting out there and known among people. And it is that thing when you look at it, when you look at the truth, again, when you can't unknow what you know, then you have to question why you believe. And then you start going towards looking at another person as a human being, as a person and not a stereotype, and look and start thinking through the relationships that you have. And I think then we have the opportunity to really look at, this thing that we say America is, just, inclusive, just send us your weary, your poor, all of these myths that we talk about. We're a long way from there. We've turned that clock back so far, but you can't unknow. As much as people want to erase this, you can't unknow what you know. You may choose not to believe it, but you can't unknow it. And then the problem is on you. It's not on us. And we've always known our history.
Tell us more about your Juneteenth celebration, which I believe begins on June 8th. Is that correct?
Yes. So this Juneteenth 2025, we've called it a reckoning, reclaiming the past, remembering Black voices, and reshaping the future. We're weaving together three narratives, stories that kind of change that illusion of separate racial stories in America, right? So we're looking at descendants, as I mentioned earlier, of founding fathers. We're looking at the Ona Judge story, who was enslaved to George and Martha Washington, and she seeks freedom and finds it in New Hampshire. We have some Jefferson descendants, a Jefferson descendant coming together with someone who was enslaved by the Washingtons and the Custis, and a whole group of these descendants people to really sit down and talk about this history that we never talked about. We're unveiling a AR project, an augmented reality project, and an AI project with Mount Vernon that tells the story of these descendant communities, using contemporary technology to tell these stories and kind of reintroduce these people back into our collective memory visually.
Talk a little bit about, in your opinion, how important healing is as part of the experience of our history, or even the celebration, I would say, of our history. Is healing an important part of the journey, or should it be an important part for people who are, if part of the history was around trauma? It wasn't all, certainly was a traumatic experience, but we were, I believe, able to enslaved individuals find the joy, which is why they can't stand us, but find the joy in our own ways. But still, there is trauma there, and is healing an important part of the journey?
Healing is, especially through any trauma, and certainly generational trauma through slavery, is something that we as Black people have to heal ourselves from. Can you hold a second, please, Elaine?
Okay.
My grandson's going to his first prom, and he needs me to put his tie on.
Oh, is he there to put his tie on?
Yes.
I want to see.
Okay. I am so sorry.
That's okay. This is a
His
funny.
dad left.
Hey, congratulations. Oh, you look nice. You're doing all black?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Are you going alone with friends or?
Yeah, I'm going with friends.
Very nice. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Very good. This is high school prom?
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Oh my gosh.
Sophomore.
You're a freshman?
Sophomore. Sorry.
Sophomore. Oh, that's a big, and you were, okay, going to prom as a sophomore? I like it.
Well, I don't know.
Very good. So we're witnessing the bow tying.
Thank you.
Good job. Have fun.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
So sorry.
That's all right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So excellent. So we were talking about healing, and it's interesting. Your grandson came in. The importance of for generations of us, right? One has to be wise. It's passed on. People don't, even if not spoken about, trauma is passed on for generations if it's not addressed.
Yeah, I think that just shows even the history, right? The sense of belonging, the sense of roots that we've carried through in our culture, from family reunions, family this, and all these moments of growth. It's part of an African tradition, right? Of community and communion in community. So that's how we heal. Our stories heal us, knowing, because everybody else is telling you you're not worth this, or you can't do this, or you're not pretty, you don't meet the standards, you're not bright, you're not whatever. There's a lot of nots, right? But when you look at our culture, no matter how our ancestors, how badly treated they were, a horrific treatment, the generations are here to tell us that they survived and they passed on something to us, right? They passed on their stories. They passed on their lives. And one of the things that I'm always amazed at is this collectiveness of, America wants to tell us that there's just all this hate and killing in us. But there isn't. I look at these moments, and we just use this whole boots on the ground dance thing. And I said, oh, America's burning, but Black people are dancing. We did that in Africa. We got our, we generations before danced through strife and came together as community and survived, right? And that's what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Dancing, stomping out, healing, right? The healing
coming together, and even that synchronization, I believe, too. Moving
our bodies, laughing together. Yes. And we're looking at each other and we're going, yeah, we're going to make it. We're going to survive this. This too shall pass. And they're not going to take our joy.
That's right. Even I think that's such a great example. I think, too, even when watching it and seeing little kids are teaching older people are teaching their grandkids. I have, only one of them is left, but they used to know all the dances before. I'm sure she knows this one. I don't know how they know. I don't know if it's osmosis, but they used to know all the line dances. Every party wants you to get out there and learn it, but it's just such a connection. So that's great.
And
great
you move
example.
in community, and that's what our ancestors brought, and that never died, is the sense of community. And we might have missed it or lost some of it on, because the history was erased, right? And because we were trying to say, the first thing in a genocide community, or when people are performing genocide, the first thing they do is they get rid of their books, they get rid of their museums, they get rid of their history. Because the people who don't know their history, don't know where they come from, can then buy into stuff, right? And can be easily led. So that's why they attack our culture, right? That's why they attack our stories. That's why they want to erase it. I see it in now, where we had made such advancements to even, having our own museum in DC. And if you've been there, just how powerful that place is, right? You see the journey from Africa to enslavement, to Jim Crow, to brutality. And then you get on the top floor and you see all the things we were able to achieve in spite of all of that. And you go, damn, I love being Black, right?
That's
You just
right.
go, wow, you
Right.
see that journey. It's palatable. It's right in you. It touches the heart, right? It touches your heart and soul. So that's what our story does. That's what our history does. It reminds us of who we are. It reminds of us this journey. It reminds us that we've survived worse than we're going through right now.
Yes.
Right?
How do we all make sure that this is passed on for generations? Like your grandson was just there. And as we
Yeah.
mentioned, you sort of work in this space or as part of your everyday life. But for the people who, whether it is or isn't, how do
Yeah.
we make sure this sort of storytelling, connection, et cetera, is passed down and this urgency about maintaining
About now.
history?
And I think we have to make a commitment in ourselves to do that. Our ancestors made a commitment that we would not forget, right? They told us we didn't know the language. We learned the language and we carried it on and we told the stories. I don't know how many young girls sat at their grandmother's knee while their hair was being combed and you heard the journey. You heard their stories. Or you're cooking and they're telling you how it was done, or they kept the little Bible and wrote things in there, whatever. We found ways to tell our stories. These stories are not dead. They come up all the time, right? And that because we make a commitment to telling each other our story. We're deliberate about it. And we find these moments of joy. Right? That's why African-American family reunions are so powerful, right? Mm-hmm. And you try not to miss them because you hear the stories and you leave those empowered. No matter what you're going to after that, you leave your family reunion empowered because you've got your posse with you. You got your group of people with you. You know who you are. You know where you're coming from. And that sustains you till the next time. We just need to be deliberate about telling our stories. And we need to strengthen our own communities. They're going to do what they want to do, but we need to strengthen our communities. And we strengthen our communities through knowing our history and sharing our stories, even if it's just our family stories that we're sharing.
Yes. Now tell people how they can find out more about the Black Heritage Trail if we're there in New Hampshire or online. There are the other ways that we can connect and find out more. What are the things that you want people to know?
We're definitely on the web, the Black Heritage Trail nh.org, www.blackheritagetrailnh.org. We're on social media everywhere, Facebook, Instagram. Just started our TikTok. They're kind of slow on that one. Instagram, in all of them. We're on all of them. And then Juneteenth celebration, we usually have a group of 7 or 8 programs for Juneteenth, and that's our celebration. But each part of our programs have an educational component. So we have the panel discussion, and then we have the singing, and then we have the drumming, right? So we have a lot of programs. Then we have a statewide community reading of Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And we do that the Saturday before 4th of July. And we're in 22 towns across the state. And everybody gets together at noontime and reads that speech. And we share that. And then we do guided tours. So you can join a guided tour from Memorial Day into November, the first week in November, the weekends. We have guided tours by a group of, we call them Sankofa scholars, who are our tour guides and interpreters.
And tour throughout New Hampshire or
the weekends, they are in Portsmouth, every weekend in Portsmouth. And then they are scheduled across New Hampshire at different times. Next year, America celebrates its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So we're asking the question, how has the Black community, African Americans, how well have we done in those 250 years? But we're bringing together a group of young social media content creators to have that discussion, what they've seen from their point of view, how we've grown or not grown in the 250 years.
So you have a full calendar all year.
A full calendar
with the
all
six
year.
of you. That's good. But that's
Yes.
how people engagement is a thing, right? Engaging people in different ways.
You know,
Excellent.
one of the things that's really funny about Black history and funny about our country, if you're not doing it all the time, it's easily forgotten.
Which do you feel is different than other types of history?
I think so, because if you look at, America, white history, you study that in school. It's part of everything that you do. It's part of your daily thing. You walk on the street, there's signs, there's buildings named after people. It's visible, it's in your face all the time. If we look at the Holocaust, there are 3, 4, 5, 6 movies a year that tells of that. When we try to tell the story of enslavement, it's been done, it's been said, we don't really need to do that again. Or the few films that come out that show, positive images of African Americans, Blacks, movements. It's a challenge for Hollywood to make those. It's a challenge for our books. It's a challenge for our art. It's all classified as Black art or Black movies or this. It's not overall. So yes, right? We have to continually remind people that this is, and again, this is why it was so easy to roll back that tide. 5 years. And, it's like it never happened.
Like it never happened. Which is what certain people want you to think. It's like it just erases that way. It never happened.
Yeah. If it stays the way it is right now, next year, who's going to remember what happened?
Right.
Right.
And I believe that's the hope. 10 years from now, really, as it goes further on, if you erase this, then people won't know. It's a very old strategy.
I was on a call with the Association of African American Museums, and it really didn't dawn. This intellectually, but until somebody says it to you, it floored me when she says, this has happened before, right? Black people moved up the ladder. We created our own towns. We had this and that.
Reconstruction.
Totally erased, right?
Yep.
The whole advancement, the doctors, the lawyers, like they never.
Even in government, the senators.
The senators, right?
Yep.
Right. So, and it was like, you're telling that story all over again. And we got to a point where it was becoming mainstream. So we have to get rid of it again. And, when it becomes mainstream, what the woman said just floored me. We're saying this doesn't change in a year or 4 years. It's generations. It's 2 generations before we get back to where we were.
Right.
So even this, the executive orders and the whole desire for this, whether it's legal or not, it doesn't matter. It achieved its goal, right?
Yes.
It achieves its goal. And its goal was to dismantle the systems that we were creating.
That's right. Systems that took years and years to everything from, yes, absolutely. We can have a whole discussion about that. It's a list. They had a targeted list of things that they wanted to roll back. And then if it takes another, 10, 20, 50 years for those things to come back, and then it's just a cycle something has to change.
Just that cycle
has to change. Yes, there has to be a break in the system.
Yeah, and we need to know that this is our story. This is our story. You're not going to tell me you're going to get rid of my story, because this is our story. And we have a role, just as anybody else, to be here, to say our stories and to share it. And it does more. It creates this sense of ourselves, right? This awareness of self, this pride. I was just going to think, this is why we go to places like Howard University, because that career,
Yes, I went to Hampton.
Hampton, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
This is that thing. And that, once you have that, nobody can take that away from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, JerriAnne, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I'm glad I got to meet, we will all get to meet your grandson via audio, that is. But thank you so much for this conversation. I'm
Thank you.
happy. And thank you also for the work that you are doing and your mighty team of six and
Of sex.
yes, of you and individuals like you all around the country and around the world who are preserving
Yes.
history of other cultures,
Yes.
indigenous
and I think
cultures.
that's one of the
other
things we
people.
need to know too. It's not exceptions. We're not the exception. We are the rule.
Mhm. That's right.
We're all doing our part in this story.
Which is all you can do.
Yeah, which is all we can
Thank
do.
you so much.